minutes and just charge up.
Okay, so we are already live. So we started well with battery charge. So hello, Daniel.
Hi, everyone.
And welcome.
Hi, Monica.
Nice to have you here this evening in my place, this beautiful morning at your place, I can see.
Yeah, it's a nice winter morning here in Brooklyn. You know, it's funny, I just came back from Europe. I was in a bunch of countries on a road trip, and people told me, are you sure you want to go to Europe? In the winter, it's gonna be freezing. And in fact, most of the trip, it was well above 0 Celsius. And I got back to New York, and it's genuinely, you know, it's cold. We don't have snow, but it's definitely chilly. So
yeah, it looks wonderful, that sun around you and the landscape.
Yeah, I love days like today.
Yeah, wonderful. And before you charge your battery, because it's as you said, it's your first walk and talk in Romania, right? And it's a live one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. How was in Europe? How was the trip in Europe for you?
Oh, I had a fantastic time. You know, I had never been any of these places. I didn't have time to go all the way to Romania. I stayed in the Central European time zone. But I went to places I'd never been, Serbia, Hungary, and Budapest especially, which if anyone knows anything about my family history, that was a very meaningful experience for me. And also, I just fell in love with Budapest as a city. And then Austria, Southern Germany, you know, Bavaria, and then Italy. Italy, of course, I spent 2 weeks in, went to various cities and just fell in love with so much about there, and then back through Slovenia and Croatia, back to Serbia. And it was a full month. So taking a month to rent a car and drive and really get to know these landscapes and experience the cultures, and especially the food, was pretty special for me.
That's quite a journey you had.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. I mean, I love road trips, and I had the time. And it's been a very busy fall with the release of the book, and I've got a musical theater project starting next month. So it felt like a really good time to to take the time to really soak this up and experience it. So
wonderful. So are you plugged in, let's say?
I'm plugged in, yeah.
Great. So I'm just wondering if before we start, you can tell us how it was for you to co-author this myth of normal that everybody is talking around today. How was the experience at the personal level? Because you just mentioned you just had quite a lot of talks, which were wonderful. And it's a wonderful book. Everybody's talking about it. You are planning a new project. So I'm just wondering what you're feeling now today about the book, about your process of co-authoring the book.
Yeah. Well, I would divide that into two. There was the process of writing it, and then there's a process of watching it take its first steps into the world and promoting it. And they've both been very positive. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to contribute. I feel very good about my contribution, and I feel very good about the collaboration between the two of us. Obviously, getting to write a book with your father is an intense, full-on immersion experience for anybody. And for me especially, given our intense relationship, but it was very good for the relationship. So I'm glad for that. I felt, it was very validating. My dad would repeatedly tell me that I was indispensable to the process, and I could feel it. And while allowing his voice to shine and his work to shine, I felt a sense of purpose because I believe in the work and I wanted it to reach the widest audience. So that was very nice. And then promoting it and watching it really succeed beyond my expectations, certainly, and I think beyond my dad's. And we certainly felt we felt it deserved it, but We didn't know how the world was going to receive it, especially in the United States. But it's been on the New York Times bestseller list for a total of, I don't know, 10 weeks or something. It fell off and now it's back on. So to see that it has staying power, to see my dad appear on some of the biggest podcast platforms is nice. And for me personally, to be invited on so many shows and do so many interviews, way more than I expected. I mean, one of my misgivings about the process was that I was going to feel left out, or if I got attention, it was just going to be as a spokesman for my dad, which is not a comfortable place to be. But in fact, it turns out people want to hear what I have to say, and I have things to say that are obviously informed by my dad's work, because it is his book primarily in terms of the genesis of the thesis and the ideas. But I have my own ways of putting things, and I think they also make a contribution to people's understanding of the book. And it's fun for me. I just like communicating. I like talking to people. So it's been very fulfilling in every way.
That sounds wonderful, especially that it is the bestseller. And I think you said the 10 week on a row, it's the bestseller in New York.
Well, it's not the bestseller, but it's on the bestsellers list, which lists the top 15 selling books.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting, right?
And the audiobook, which I narrated, sorry to interrupt, but the audiobook has been as high as number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list and has never fallen off the chart. At one point, I was beating, Matthew McConaughey and Michelle Obama, and it's pretty validating and satisfying, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, and it's quite amazing, especially that the book, it's about the myth of normality,
Mm-hmm.
and it beats, as you said, Michelle Obama, and stays there.
Well, she ended up overtaking us, but still.
But still, yeah, because I was just wondering, because you are so open and you talk so open about your experience, about the validation and about your relationship with your father, which eventually this book is not the first time that you worked together, because you had that workshop, Hello Again, which I personally see many recordings of them. I hope I will be there live sometime. So I'm just wondering, in your view of normality after all this, and seeing how this myth of normality, let's say, skyrockets the tops, what's your view now in respect to what is normal and what is not normal?
Well, it turns out that it's much more normal to question normality than one might have thought. People were ready for this. You have to want to ask the question to pick up this book. If you're comfortable with normality, if you look at normality and see nothing amiss, why would you be interested in this book? You would put it down after the introduction. We're very explicit about what we're doing. It's not some kind of bait and switch. So it tells me that normality is shakier already than it might seem. And that it truly is much more normal for people to be in pain, to be suffering, to be confused, to be stressed, than even I might have guessed, and for people to be aware of it. Because for them to be interested in debunking normality, they have to be feeling the cost of the illusion, and they have to be willing to be disillusioned in a positive way.
Yeah. And this disillusion, it's not la vie en rose, right? So it comes with pain, getting rid of.
Well, yeah, if there is a solution, but yeah, getting rid of illusions, or putting them aside, at least seeing through them, and then having a choice if you want to go back to them. One of my favorite lyrics comes from a Guns N' Roses song, actually. And Axl Rose says, "I've worked too hard for my illusions just to throw them all away."
Yeah, we say hello also. We say hello also. Yeah, we work too hard on our illusions, but the fact that we are open to see them, at least as the illusions, without trying to get rid of them, it's one thing that, yeah.
I think that's a good point. Sorry, I keep interrupting. It's the Zoom thing. Or it's just that I interrupt people. It's a bad habit. It takes work to maintain illusions. It's called cognitive dissonance. You know, that what you actually see is at odds with what you believe. So you have to work extra hard to keep the illusion going.
Yeah, and to put so much energy into it.
Yeah, it costs. It definitely costs.
And if you talk about it, when we put too much energy in our illusions or our stories, or what we say about the reality, sometimes also our body pays a price. And I'm sure I have seen you discussing this, because eventually when you see it's an illusion, it's like you wake up, right? So who is going to go to sleep again after they wake up? It's just a question that I'm launching here for you. I'm just wondering how it lands for you.
Well, I have two answers to that. There are people who are incentivized by their position in society, or by necessity, but not really. Even if you have to continue in the same old way by economic necessity, you're not asleep. You're woke to the stresses. You see through it already, probably. So people who are comfortable could look at this and say, oh, that's interesting, and let it penetrate intellectually. And then just go back to building weapons or selling addictive drugs, or selling unnecessary products to children because that's what butters their bread. In which case they haven't really let it penetrate emotionally, or they're willing to live with a lot of cognitive dissonance. So there are people, I'm sure, who might be impenetrable, or they might let it penetrate, but ultimately they don't choose to do anything with it. And that's a valid choice, you know. And I understand why people do. The other way I would respond is that you say people can't go back to sleep. Well, sleep has a way of setting in because it's a habit, and so we might get sleepy, and the veil of illusion might come down, but it'll be less. It'll be thinner. It'll be more see-through. It'll be easier to part the curtains and to see things clearly. So I do think that there is at least an incremental change in our ability to debunk things, and that maybe the next time you see something that previously you didn't notice, you will notice it. You don't necessarily wake up all at once and get enlightened and everything is clear. I think that's an unreasonable assumption. But even a little bit of opening is an opening. And as Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because sometimes people just consume energy in expecting that big awakening, like it needs to be big, it needs to be wow, it needs to, but by pursuing that, which is an illusion, of course, right? So by pursuing that, you just miss these small steps that you take every day, like for your own healing, for your own awakening, for your own perception of the reality, that you forget to praise a bit yourself, you know, like you forget to validate your hard work in doing that.
Yeah, and to actually acknowledge where you are, which is one of the requirements, prerequisites, is to accept the not and the pursuing and the striving is not really an antidote to the myth of normal. It's kind of just a continuation of it, and you see it in the healing space, the therapy world, specifically on Instagram and on these social media platforms, because people are putting quick sound bites and advice, and they're selling something, you know. And I'm not implicated in this, you know, that any, you know. So I try to make the content that I don't like that word, but the content that I put out as nuanced as possible and as down to earth as possible, and not giving people solutions. I can't tell you how to heal your trauma. I can give you some principles that seem to help the process along, and I can offer my mental chiropractic service, which is something I do on my own for people, which is not therapy, but it can help the process. But yeah, I think we do ourselves no favors. You're right. When we idealize total healing or even total authenticity, authenticity is a moment by moment thing. Noticing where you're not being authentic is authentic. Noticing where you're suffering is authentic. The only part of you that can notice these things without blowing them out of proportion or making a big story out of it, just noticing. Only the authentic, aware, present part of you can do so. So now, speaking of energy and speaking of the body, I just realized that I just did a walk with a client just before this, and I didn't actually get to eat breakfast. And I've got a couple of hard-boiled eggs and some guacamole sitting here. So would it be totally rude if I just kind of munched for a minute and then left the car and walked?
No, I think it will be absolutely great. Just feel like yourself. It's nothing rude about it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take your time.
All right, I'm gonna see if I can place this phone in a place where I can have both hands free.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm a little diagonal, but that's how it'll have to be.
Enjoy your meal. Enjoy your meal. And while you are preparing for the meal, I'm wondering if you can still talk to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was curious. I was hearing everything that you said, and I am a bit curious about what stories or illusions have you found in your life by writing The Myth of Normal.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that question. Well, I have found the myth that I can't really measure up to my father, and that people won't see me if I stand next to him because he shines brighter than me, and that there's some injustice. In fact, it's just an illusion. There's nothing stopping me except my own self-concept, and perhaps the way my father might have seen me in the past, which wasn't without reason, might have been a little harsh. But once I stepped into that power willingly and put myself forward in a positive way to say, hey, I want this to happen, and I can help make it happen. And in fact, I might be so bold as to say I'm necessary for it to happen. Because there was no one else who could have written this book with him. It's just the way it is. No one knows him like I did. No one gets his work from the inside. No one can find a way to channel his voice. And in so doing, that illusion just had no ground to stand on anymore. It just was so obviously bogus. I've already mentioned the illusion that people don't want to hear what I have to say. The illusion that I have to choose one thing to do in my life. I was worried that by collaborating with my father, I'm selling out on my artistic career, because I'm a musical theater writer first and foremost. People sometimes don't know that or lose sight of it, and sometimes I lose sight of it. And I was afraid that I would, and I was afraid in some ways that now, oh shit, now I'm in the therapy world and I don't want to be in the therapy world. Well, it turns out I can like make a cameo in the world of healing and whatever, but also the book is commenting on society, and I care about that, and I've got a lot of things to say, and I write musicals.
You also have a new podcast. Sorry for interrupting. You started a new podcast about it, right?
I sure did. Yeah. Just in the past few weeks. In fact, we have a new episode out today, episode 2. It's called Let's Get Lyrical, like let's get physical, Let's get lyrical with Carice and Daniel. And Carice, people may know her from Game of Thrones. She played Melisandre on Game of Thrones. And we talk about song lyrics every week. The first episode was introducing ourselves via song lyrics. And this week's episode is about songs with God in the title.
Oh.
And we break them down, but we also talk about our own personal responses to them and connections to them. So I really enjoy that. I have a YouTube channel that is now kind of on pause because I'm doing this instead, called Lyrics to Go, where I would analyze lyrics from the perspective of a lyricist, which I am. This is less analytical and more just banter and chatting, but there is some analysis. Anyway, it's really fun. I encourage people to subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and on YouTube. We're having a blast, and we plan to do a lot of great things with it. So that's really fun. And I have my mental chiropractic work. And, hopefully, and I think this has come true, I can find a common thread between all the things I do, so that it's all coming from me and that I have sort of a unique and unified purpose in the world, a gift to give, and I can choose to do it in a whole lot of different ways. So
quite an awareness, right? Quite an awareness, right? From the fact that I can only do one thing and I have to choose something, like to see that in the end it's what not only you but everybody is saying. Everything is interconnected. We are the ones who separate, who make the boundaries, who put obstacles in the road.
That's exactly right.
It sounds like there was quite a journey for you, this myth of normal. And you
very much so. It was a huge journey. And like I said, I'm just very grateful for it. It's definitely changed my life. And I feel very privileged and proud, which is a nice combination of things to feel.
And you just mentioned many things besides the myth of normal. So I'm wondering, now that you just left your car for the walk and talk, how it is with the walk and talk and mental chiropractic.
Right.
What's happening?
Well, what goes on? Like, what is it? Well, so there's two components to that question. One is, what is mental chiropractic? And then why walk? And then how does it work? Mental chiropractic is just a term that was given to me by someone who was trying to describe the difference between me and my father. Because it was happening in a group setting where people might have expected to get Gabor Jr. In fact, I was sort of apprenticing with him. I used to be married to someone who was his apprentice. That was a whole complicated drama. We're divorced now, but someone really remarked, you don't work with people the way your father does. And I took that as, a compliment. Not that there's anything wrong with what my dad does, far from it, but that I have my own unique way of doing things and can contribute something compatible but different was really nice to hear. And so I held on to that term, but I didn't know what to do with it until, so I'll describe what that means to me, what that is. A therapist is going to talk to you over many weeks, many years, perhaps. It's a long-term relationship designed to gently let you explore yourself and get to know yourself incrementally and over time, and transformation happens, but it's softer and more gentle and less linear, less sort of, there can be an overall intention, but it's much more open-ended. When I take a walk with somebody, when I do a session, I explicitly do not want to see them the following week.
Wonderful.
Because I want what they got out of this session to make an immediate impact in getting them unstuck. So for me, it's not about healing your trauma. I can't do that. That's a long-term proposition. but we can have a small victory in your current life situation, because the things that are bothering you about the only reason to work on your trauma is that it's affecting you now. So a person picks one way that they're stuck, and it, maybe trauma related. It may just be being a human, where they're confused or resigned or unsure or frustrated or anything like that. And that everything they know, their self-awareness, is not helping them change it. And that is what I call being stuck. And the chiropractic part is that the mind, I see it as like a spine. It has a certain organization to it where things are meant to be in alignment. And if they are in alignment, then they work together, and we just function smoothly. Like my catchphrase on my website is, when your mind is aligned, you just work. All your best qualities come to the surface, your flexibility, it's supple, you're creative, you have fortitude, you're resilience. You know yourself to be powerful and free and self-expressed. When things are not in alignment, or let me reverse it, when you don't experience those things, it's because something is out of alignment in the spine of your mind. So my aim on a mental chiropractic walk is, within a relatively short period of time, usually 75 minutes, is to cause a shift in the way you're looking at it, such that, again, you can't go back to not having a choice about your point of view. That doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it. I can't control that. But what I can guarantee you is that if you take a walk with me and you come in with the real intention of seeing something new, because you're willing to get unstuck, which is not, that takes some work sometimes, because when we're stuck, it's often comfortable to be stuck. So you really have to intend it. We can get to the place where you're not choiceless anymore. You actually have another way of seeing it, and it's going to be more compelling to you because it's just got much more flavor and possibility and juice to it. So that's the mental chiropractic piece. And I have, a sort of loose method of doing that. Then the walking piece is just, it just helps the process. It's like the centrifuge that gets the particles moving, or it's the heat that cooks the egg. And it turns out there are very good scientific reasons for why that works that I'd like to look into more, because I'd like to write a book about this and this, somatically the hemispheres are working. I think of it also metaphorically. You're moving through space. So literally, with every step I take or every turn of my head, my point of view is literally shifting. So my mental point of view can take a cue from that. Also, I'm walking in a partly natural environment, and nature is always aligned with itself. Nature is never stuck. It's always getting unstuck, even if a river is dammed up, unless human beings have built a dam to stop the water, but the water doesn't have a problem. The water's just doing what the water is doing. So when we're trapped inside our own mind trying to figure something out, we're just compounding the stuckness. When we expose ourselves to an environment that gives us a different model, I think it influences. So, but also selfishly, I do it because I enjoy it this way. I don't like sitting and talking to someone. It makes me feel like a therapist, and I have better conversations when I'm walking. In fact, this came about because a very good friend of mine in Western Canada observed, he said to me, "You're really good at walking with people." And I said, yeah, as a kid, I loved taking walks and hikes with my grandfather and talking while we did and conversing, walking in the woods in Vancouver. So it just kind of lights me up in a way that it wouldn't if I didn't. And to be quite frank, the reason I have enough things going on in my life, I don't need this. It turns out it's become a nice little side business, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it, if I didn't enjoy every aspect of it. And so the walking helps with that, and people actually find it very helpful. And I think it's a cool model that, of course, most of my clients are all over the world. I did have a client here in Brooklyn this morning, so we walked together in person, but that happens relatively rarely. It's cool to be walking with somebody in Saudi Arabia or or Romania, although that hasn't happened yet. Maybe it'll happen after
Or
this interview.
maybe it will happen. And you
Yeah.
know, I'm listening to you, and what it comes to my mind, just thumping in like this, is that, you know, that was happening even long time ago, because the philosophers in Agora in ancient Greece, that's how they were discussing, they were
Oh, no
brainstorming,
way.
let's say. Yeah, there is actually, if you look in the history, they used to walk. There was those philosophical walks where they shared things about life, about existential questions and stuff like that. So I was just thinking, because they were saying the same thing. The fact that you are moving, it's like the whole field of possibilities, as you said, is moving around you. If you stay in a box, you know, it's like your mind is boxed and you sit in a box. It's much
Yeah.
more difficult to see other possibilities. So I think it's quite great. And I also want to mention something. You said it's not like I am healing their trauma, but you know, I I cannot refrain myself from saying it. Eventually, nobody's healing anybody.
Well,
And
100%. You're absolutely right.
yeah, so I'm just thinking, the fact that I see you are smiling with all your face, telling how much you love this, okay, side business, but eventually you love it to work with someone, maybe in Romania, maybe in Saudi Arabia or whatever. Isn't it actually just allowing the space for people to find their own possibilities and healing?
Well,
So,
100%. I mean, because here's the thing. I consider this an outside in form of healing.
mhm,
Rather than going, okay, let's go back to your childhood and really, yeah, which is my dad's métier. That's what he does better than anyone.
mhm,
And he teaches it to thousands of therapists. What I do is, let's start with what's happening now. Okay. Let's start with you being sick and tired of what's happening now. Let's just start with you being sick to death of it. Let's start with you intending something different, even if you don't know how. That's a leap of faith or a leap of intention, which itself is awakening something in you that is counter trauma, because
yeah.
trauma shuts us down. And then we have a conversation where you see through it. You realize it ain't necessarily so, as the old song goes, and you see a different possibility. And then you go out in your life and you live that new possibility, and something shifts. Well, what message does that send to the deepest hurt, wounded part of you? Oh, I'm not hopeless. It's not set in stone. It actually, again, as the definition of trauma we use in Myth of Normal says, it's not about what happens to you, it's what happens inside you. Well, if you can start to shift what happens inside you by shifting your capacity to shift what happens outside you, well, we're sending waves of possibility energy into a space of no possibility. Well, that's healing. So I'll
Yeah.
take that. I'll take that. The philosopher thing is fascinating. I didn't know that. I do know that Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, was he Danish?
Yeah. Yeah.
Said there is no problem that I cannot walk myself out of, or something like that. Now, of course,
Mhm.
that didn't stop him from committing suicide, but nonetheless, it's a potent observation. I'm really glad you told me that. I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. And just walking a bit with you now, even if I'm not walking, because I was telling you I wanted to walk with you, but it's so dark here in Romania that probably you would have walked with a ghost if I would have done that.
I
But
understand.
just walking with you now, it just gives you another vibe, because
Yeah.
you know, there is also a lot of myths, you know, which are part of this myth of normal. Like, you really need to work on yourself, you need
Oh
to
yeah.
dig deep, you really need to go inside. But
Fuck that.
eventually, yeah, sometimes fuck that, you know, because Insae, have you heard of Insae? Which is
Who?
Insae, it's a word. It's a word from Nordic language, which somehow is translated looking from outside in. And that's exactly what you said, like
Yeah.
it can start outside in. And most of the time it starts outside because something happens in your close environment and so on. But also
Sure.
healing can happen outside. And from this point of view, it's interesting. You started by saying, yeah, it's just a service and we walk and talk and I'm not healing. And now, yeah, maybe is there any other possibility? I would ask you.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe I'm being overly modest. I also want to manage people's expectations. I want to get them to a space of not knowing what the hell this is.
Mhm.
Not knowing, because I want to confound their expectations. I want them to be open to something they don't know. What I guarantee them, what I promise them, is they'll be unstuck. And that's not a small thing. That's a bold claim that I love backing up every time, nearly every time. I've had a few times where I wasn't sure, I would have had to have followed up with them to find out. But that's very rare. Often by the end of it, someone's like, wow, my mind is blown, or okay, I see. I mean, the person I walked with today, the farthest we could get, because he's a very cerebral person who is very self-aware,
Mhm.
but that self-awareness is its own kind of prison, and I know that very, very well. And they were engaging throughout the walk in a kind of cerebral way, and I had to say to them at the end, look, to have access to your intention, you're going to have to give up the attitude that I need a guarantee in order to take an aligned action. And either you're going to do that or you're not. But if you don't do that, then you at least admit to yourself that being unstuck is not your biggest priority, because you always win the game you're playing, the game you're actually playing. So if you're prioritizing safety and comfort, once you get your awareness is only as good as the action that it fuels. Otherwise, it's just more knowledge, more self-knowledge, more trivia, really, about yourself. It's trivial compared to the kind of knowledge that actually gives power. So sometimes all I can do is leave someone in that dilemma and trust that they'll choose it for themselves. I can't force anybody. And you can tell I love this. I really love doing it. And it also raises the bar for me, because if I'm giving this to other people, it's not aligned for me not to be practicing it for myself. I can't ultimately do it sustainably if I'm not willing to challenge my own stucknesses and limitations, which takes longer because it's hard to see your own mind. But
Yeah.
it's helped me have a clearer sense of myself.
And I'm also curious if this walk and talks that you do with others, when you finish the walking and you have your own time, you have your own eggs and guacamole or whatever, is it something that you recognize in yourself that the discussion with that person brought to you?
Just energy. I just find it energizing.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully an appetite for getting back to the things that fuel me.
Mm-hmm.
Before my trip to Europe, I was doing sometimes multiple walks a day, and now I've limited to just one, because because it's just, it's an hour and a half or whatever. That's enough walking for one day. And also because I have other things that I need to be doing in order to be aligned. Otherwise, I am turning into like a professional helper, and that's not where I want to be primarily located. So, yeah.
And where do you want to be? Where do you want to be located?
Just well-rounded. I think as a creative person, being creative. So whether it's working on the podcast or playing piano, which I just bought a piano in the fall, my first ever real piano, and practicing for an hour every day, and I spend a little too much time posting content on Instagram these days. It's sort of a guilty pleasure. But I'm also promoting my work and the book and things like that. And my musical theater, I'm currently orchestrating one of my piano scores for a string quartet, because there's a production of the show coming up at a college in Philadelphia in the spring. So there's plenty of stuff I can be doing. I take an acting class once a week that I really enjoy. I'd like to take up a martial art, to give myself a physical practice. I find that, I need things that are energetic. That actually grounds me. So yeah, those are some of the things that I want, that I really need to have as part of my life. Now I'm just stepping into a coffee shop because I'd like to get a coffee. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
I will take some water, waiting for the coffee.
No, it's fine. You can keep asking me a question. It'll take me just a couple of
minutes. I'm just wondering, people can enter your website.
Large drip cup? Yeah.
For the walk and talk, they can enter your website and they can schedule their walk and talk with you, right?
That is correct. Where do I tap it? Where's the tap? Yeah, so it's walkwithdaniel.com is the
I will place it also in the comments to our recorded live, so everybody can find it. It sounds like quite some walk with Daniel, I would say, after listening to you and after seeing how much you like it eventually, because
so I'm not sure what to do here. Oh, thank you. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely an experience, and even at the very least, you're taking a walk outside, which for some people it takes something. I walked with someone yesterday who really doesn't do that for herself, and her topic was like actual self-care, so it's a big deal. And you're also spending time with someone who's really interested in you getting what you want, and that itself, connection is important. And it's in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to pay someone $200 to do that, but I think it's a valuable service in and of itself. And I would like to lead workshops and write a book about how to train people to do it for themselves and with each other, because I do see it as a form of peer support. You don't need to go to school for years to do this. You just have to sort of understand the principles. And as I do it more and more, I'm understanding those principles better, because it is completely made up.
And it makes you wonder, right? What's stopping you from taking a walk? Because most of the people, even people that I know, they usually don't take walks just to take a walk. It's like if they take a walk, it's weekend, we have a walk, but otherwise, it's a resistance kind of. A lot of people would rather run on a treadmill than just take a walk. But I mean, in this day and age of audiobooks and podcasts, like, I don't even need to be with my mind to take a walk. I can just move my body, and it's actually really good for you. Yeah.
Especially if you can get a little bit of a heart rate up. Nothing wrong with it. A lot right with it.
Yeah. It seems I blurred myself when I said that, so it must be a reason. We'll see what the universe will say, because I don't know how to unblur myself. But this brings me to my next question to you, because you are saying about a new project that you are preparing.
Yes.
Tell us more about it if you want.
I'd be happy to. Yeah. That's a very meaningful project to me. It's a musical called The Sweet Hereafter, which is based on a novel by my favorite, I used to say living author, but unfortunately he died last week,
Oh.
Russell Banks, who is a real unique American author in that he writes about rural people, people in, you might say, Trump country, people, working class people. And America likes to talk about everything but class. America likes to talk about race and gender and a lot of different things, and very well it should. But he also talks about race, and he talks about poverty. And he just portrays human beings in the most compassionate, unsentimental way. And I recommend all of his books. You know, he's just a beautiful author. And I got to meet him last year when he came and saw the first ever public presentation of my show. And I was very much looking forward to him being there for whenever it premieres somewhere in New York. But, you know, that's not going to happen. But it's a show, you know, I don't write musicals that people might recognize as typical musical theater material. Musical theater material is, you know, big fun song and dance or big adventure stuff. And I do have a show or two that are more lighthearted. This one is pretty heavy in its topic matter. This novel was made into a Canadian independent film in the 1990s that got an Oscar nomination. It won a prize at Cannes. It's about a small town in upstate New York that goes through a terrible tragedy, a school bus accident that kills many children in the town. And it's about the aftermath of the crash. It's about how people cope with grief. Some people cope with it by numbing themselves out. Some people cope with it by being rageful and angry and vindictive and projecting their own long-standing griefs and turning them into grievances. And some people transform in ways that they were always meant to. And calamity and crisis can bring out the best in people or the worst in people. And it's really about a community struggling with this this inexplicable, horrific thing. And it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and it's almost entirely sung through, which is to say that there are very few scenes with no music. Almost everything is sung like an opera, but it doesn't sound like an opera. It sounds much more contemporary. The language is more contemporary. I try to write like people speak, except just a little heightened, a little more poetic, a little more structured. And, you know, I had such an ally and a collaborator, in a sense, an off-site collaborator in the novelist, because the text of the book is so lyrical. That's what I noticed when I first read it. It just kind of grabbed me and said, you know, make me a musical, because it already kind of was. And it's told in 4 parts from 4 different points of view, which is very appealing to me, because I can give a slightly different musical language or a completely different musical language to each character, and because it creates a very well-rounded story. And I started writing it about 6 years ago now, maybe.
Wow.
And maybe longer. And it had its first public presentation, or it's semi-public. It was kind of an invited thing last year at a theater in New York, quite a prominent theater, actually. And it's going to have its first sort of staged, not fully realized, you know, low budget college production with not age appropriate actors for the most part, because they're very young. But nonetheless, it's a developmental step that we very much need. I've got a director and a music director, and we really are happy with our cast. We cast it in the fall, and like I said, I get to orchestrate it for the first time. So these production elements of lighting and sound and orchestration, they very much make a musical what it is. And so the chance to develop a show and see it more fully realized is an enormous moment in the development of any show, and shows take forever. You know, a friend of mine's musical just closed on Broadway yesterday, and it was 18 years in the making. And it won the Pulitzer. yeah, and it won the Pulitzer Prize and the Tony Awards. And, you know, you never know where something's going to go. So you just have to stay present and focused. And to have had the blessing of Russell before he passed, the enthusiastic blessing, he said to me, "It's too good not to happen." And, you know, from his lips to God's ears. And now that's a shorter distance for the words to travel. So I'm just really, really excited about it.
Yeah,
Music, yeah.
it sounds amazing, and it sounds amazing because somehow, I don't know about you, but I'm hearing you, and I just see how the red the red thread is unfolding, you know, because you are talking here about coping mechanisms after a tragedy, about what's happening, about putting it to music, about orchestrating
That's very
this
right.
and everything. So somehow I got very emotional. I don't know the novel of Russell Banks, but I got emotional just hearing you about just exposing what is happening.
Yeah.
So it's quite amazing, right? How somehow just being whatever our soul wants to be, we get where we are supposed to be anyway. Yeah.
Well, I think that's because everybody's soul has a particular kind of specialty, and it takes a while to find that. And we don't live in a society that makes that easy. You know, we don't have rites of passage. We don't have elders who can help us find that. In fact, we have a lot of confusing distractions and static. But once you find it, yeah, everything you do, whatever it is, you know, rounds out that and fulfills it. And you're right. I mean, this show, you know, all my musicals, I want to show human beings themselves, not to give them an escape from themselves, but to give them an escape from the prison of being locked in one way of seeing things, and to enhance compassion and insight and yeah.
And eventually this becomes also a space for healing.
I think so. I think the theater at its best is a space where people gather in community to have a healing experience, even if that is just to experience joy and delight for a few hours.
And belonging, and being with friends. And maybe, I don't know, a line of an actor will trigger something in me or not, or whoever knows, you know.
But also it opens you to transformation, because what happens in a theater is that the air changes when a show goes along for a while. Sometimes it takes about 15-20 minutes to like settle into it and get used to it. But as you give over as you suspend your disbelief and you invest in the reality of what you're seeing, and you're no longer seeing actors on a stage, but you're witness to a whole world. Reality, so-called reality, normal reality, is melting in front of your face and opening up something much more beautiful, which is why it's always so disappointing to me to go to a show that doesn't do that, because I'm just sitting there watching people perform, you know, as opposed to getting an immersive experience in a different world. So yeah, no, sure, it's healing. I mean, for me, my soul's specialty, I think, is crystallizing things. I love making life crystalline in some way, transparent, precious, you know, defined. That's the way I frame it for myself.
We are very honored and grateful to meet your soul today, Daniel.
Thank you.
And it's really, I'm very grateful for this talk with you. And I just have a last question. Maybe not the last, maybe see each other in the next episode. I don't know, but because we are close. Thank you. I was just thinking, working with people in orchestrating this project, you know, like exactly what you said, that it's not only performing, like reading a script or playing a role. No, it's like really being in the character, and you orchestrating this. I think it's a wonderful work also with the people in your cast, even with the lights and equipment and everything. And it's transforming not only for the audience. I'm just curious about your thought. That's how I view it. It also transforms them as human beings and as beautiful souls, because eventually we all have a beautiful soul. We just sometimes need to remind ourselves that. Yeah.
Look, my favorite praise that I get when I get it is not from awards committees, it's not from audiences, it's from my collaborators.
Yeah.
Telling me that that doing this project has changed them in some way. Collaboration is the key to musical theater. As a novelist, maybe you're collaborating with your publisher and your editor and all this, but it's a lonely thing. And for me, the biggest learning curve was not learning how to write songs. I learned some things, but that was easy. Just develop it and practice it. The hardest part was learning to collaborate with people, because I was used to being a solo singer-songwriter. I recorded an album of my songs back 5 years before I went to grad school. I did everything. I played every instrument. I sang all the voices. I wrote all the songs, music and lyrics. As a musical theater writer, you learn to give up that control and to put some of your ego aside and know which parts to keep and which parts to relinquish, and keep your eyes on the bigger picture, and to let other people contribute to you and really recognize what other people do well. And I'll tell you, that skill set, which I've honed over 17 years now, or going on 18, really served me well in working with my father. I had much more experience at it than he did. And this was someone who had been working alone on his book for a long time. And even though he was kind of at loose ends and didn't know what to do with it, and he knew he needed help, wasn't used to relinquishing control, wasn't used to opening up his voice to being transformed and expanded. And so I was able in some ways to bring him along and to demonstrate the value of collaboration. And by the end, we had a really lovely collaboration. And now when we work together, as we are going to be writing our next book, Hello Again, and there's going to be a podcast later this year about that. Collaboration is my favorite. It's one of my favorite things now. And when I'm taking walks with people, it's collaborative. I'm collaborating with them to, get something for them. So, it inherently busts up my story that I'm all alone and that nobody sees me or understands me.
Or if I can share some of my story, that I don't need anyone, I can do it on my own. So why should I cooperate? No, sometimes the story goes like that. And
but even if I'm writing it on my own, so some of my shows I've written with other people. I have 2 shows where I'm the lyricist, and I have a very good friend, Will Aronson, who's the composer, and I love working with him because his music gives my lyrics a whole other flavor, because it's different music. So I have to find different ways of expressing things, and it's just really fun. And I love his music, and I love the songs we write together, and I write different kinds of shows with him. Other times I write the songs and someone else writes or helps me write the script. And with the Sweet Hereafter, I'm writing all 3, but I'm collaborating, like I said, in some ways with this novel that's there, with the text. So it gives me a completely different version of myself, and it dissolves the lonely ego and makes it more part of something bigger, which is healing in itself, because trauma disconnects us from ourselves, it disconnects us from the world, and it convinces us that we're all alone. So as I do more and more of it, it's the antidote, really. I love it. And I hope to do it for a long time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I would like to thank you for everything that you shared with us today. And I would love to continue our talk. Maybe you let us know when you launch. I don't know if you know, when are you launching the podcast with Hello Again? What's happening with the book?
Yeah, in the fall sometime, I think. And the book will be out in a couple of years. We still have to write it. We're still recovering from the myth of normal. But hey, Monica, anytime you want to do this, we didn't take any questions from the audience this time.
Yeah, because I was totally into walking with you, so I didn't get the chance to take a look.
I'll tell you what, I don't know what your time is like, but I have about 15 minutes before I get back to my place. If you want to do that now, we can do that, or we can save it for next time.
Let me check and see if I can connect and see if we have any questions. If you still have some time, yeah, just give me a moment.
Yeah.
I will take a look. Yeah. So I have a question which landed directly in my messenger. And the question goes like this. How do you know it's your soul and not your ego? Someone is asking.
That's a good question. Your ego is always trying to fill a void, a perceived void in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It generates stress by its nature. It's always stressed out. It's always effortful. It's compulsive. It can never get enough. It's really an addict, you know. It needs another hit the minute it gets so. And it can, you know what, the two can coexist in the same thing. Like, for instance, Instagram is an ego machine. I mean, it really depends on people's fragile, insecure egos wanting more and more. Now, I can post something, and I do all the time, that people tell me is amazing and life-changing and insightful and wonderful and hits them right in the heart and the soul. Well, that warms, you know, my soul. I feel like, okay, I'm connecting. My ego goes, okay, great. Awesome. I wonder how many people liked that. Well, who gives a shit? You know, well, my ego does, because it wants validation. It wants to know that. Now, as long as I know that, and I'm aware of the costs, and I'm tracking to see I'm not getting lost, and I don't worry about it too much. You know, as long as I'm clear on what my sole purpose is. But the ego is grasping, and it's busy, and it's full of story. You know, it's caught up in the narrative. Your soul just kind of knows. You feel you drop into it rather than getting caught up in it like a hamster wheel. Those are some of the ways I would distinguish it. Let me think if there's anything else. Yeah, the ego wants to prove something. The soul wants to create something.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful saying. The soul wants to create something, and the ego wants to prove something.
Yeah.
And yeah, if I just may add, maybe relating to that question also, I would love your view on it. Maybe it's not like it's either soul or ego. Maybe it's like a relationship. It's like walking together, you know? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, 100%. We all need a healthy ego. To be human beings, that is. Now, some enlightened masters completely have their ego dissolved, and they see through it completely. But even they would say, you know, I've heard some of I don't have too many spiritual teachers that I really enjoy. I mean, many of them have the truth, but many of them just aesthetically turn me off, you know? Adyashanti is one who, and it sounds like a fancy name, but he's really just a down-to-earth Northern California dude who rides a mountain bike. And he had an awakening experience. And he says it's really, it's just that the ego gets less dense. And you work with it. But an ego literally is the sense of separate self. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be human beings. You know, when we're born, we don't have it. We don't experience ourselves as separate. We don't have an I. The ego is the I. And it's a good thing we have that. Otherwise, we wouldn't do anything. We would just rest in the eternal consciousness and perfect equanimity that we are, and we'd just be one with the universe. There's nothing to do. We'd just be in the flow. I don't know. I like being a human being. I like having an ego. It means I can clash against other egos and collaborate and, you know, make love and whatever comes up. Like I can have I can go on a road trip by myself, make choices and fail and succeed and risk things and get depressed sometimes. I mean, it's all part of the dance of being human. So there is nothing wrong with the ego. Only the ego would make itself wrong. Although rather the superego, right? The part of the ego that says, I shouldn't do this. But some egos have a concept of themselves as flawed, and they kind of get off on that. There really isn't. And so a collaboration between the two is a very, very good thing. The question is, who's leading, who's the cart and who's the horse? Who is it for? You know, is the ego in service of a bigger purpose, and does it know its place? Or is it being a tyrannical ruler that wants all the credit and thinks that it's like super serious? And that, you know, if you know you're playing a game, then you can play it full on. If you're an athlete, right? If you're playing in the World Cup of soccer, if I'm the Romanian national soccer team, I don't know if you guys made the World Cup this time.
For sure we didn't, but I don't watch soccer so much, but for sure we didn't.
Okay. Yeah. Canada is no great shakes either. But you know, if I'm a professional hockey player, let's say, I better have a healthy ego, or else I'm just not going to try. I better want to win. I better be upset if I lose. But as long as I know it's a game, if I don't know it's a game, that's not going to help my playing. And in a way, the soul is playing a game. Or rather, the ego is kind of playing, like, we get to play the game of being individuals for a while, and then we die, and whatever happens to our consciousness happens, who knows? But the game matters. We can make it matter, but I think it's just more enlivening and more empowering to treat it that way than to buy into the ego story that there's something to prove and all that. Now, the fact that we're mortal raises the stakes of the game. Just like if a basketball game went on forever, the scoring wouldn't matter. Yeah. The fact that there's a buzzer coming means you have limited time, but it's a game.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something, and then I would like to watch to see if I have another question for you, if you still have some time. The last question today.
I have about 5 minutes.
Okay, then just something out of what you said, because it makes me wonder again. It was someone, not me. I don't recall now who. But someone was saying that the only way you can win the game is not playing the game.
That's a favorite line of mine from episode 1 of the HBO series The Wire. Now,
probably that's why it popped up in my mind, you know. But yeah, I was just wondering, you know, because as long as you recognize it's a game, you can either play the game, but you take the responsibility, like 100%. I'm playing this game.
That's right.
Or there is also the choice of not playing the game, because you know, like, yeah, I'm just brainstorming now.
It depends, Monica, on what game it is. Is it a game worthy of your life? So many of us inherit games that are not worthy of our lives, like Proving. That's also a game, but it doesn't treat itself like a game. It feels very urgent, right? Because I'm not valid unless I do. In the context of the episode I'm talking about, it's the wife of a police captain who's caught up in the politics of the department, and it's a corrupt department. And she says, you cannot lose if you do not play. And she's talking about a toxic game.
Yeah.
So she's encouraging him to make the choice. She's saying, this game is not worthy of you. You're bigger than this. And of course, he doesn't make that choice. And he does his best within it. I'm talking about the game that we can't really opt out of. We're playing it whether we like it or not. So are we going to play it full on? Within that, there's smaller games. Business is a game. A relationship is a game. If it doesn't work out, I got married and divorced. I lost that game. But my soul won, because I needed to lose that game in order to learn some pretty gnarly, important things about me and have some illusions busted up. So, it's just a question of choosing your games, selecting your games consciously, as consciously as possible, and then realizing the value of every win and every loss.
It's wonderful. I will keep it as an ending line, like choosing your game and become aware of the game with capitals, because I think it's a wonderful sum up of our discussion today. And thank you so much, Daniel, for walking and talking to us. And I look
really,
forward.
my pleasure. This is a great interview format. And I have to say, your questions were just really sublime questions. I've done a lot of interviews, and I really felt like you were not only with me, but you were, forwarding the conversation in really interesting and original ways. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I wish you a wonderful day there, even if it's a bit cold. And
I'm going inside for the rest of the day.
Okay, then enjoy your creative day, and thank you once again. I'm really grateful for this. Thank you so much, Daniel.
You're very welcome, Monica. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.